Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me with you today. Again, my name is Kaitlin Curtice. I am an essayist, a poet, a public speaker. I am also the founder of the Aki Institute for Peace and Justice, which is an interdisciplinary institute that I'm launching later this year. I am a citizen of the Potawatomi Nation, and I live on land tended to and cared for by the Abenaki and Wabanaki peoples. And I'm so grateful to be with all of you today. I want to begin by reading a poem to you. I always like to read a poem at the beginning of my talks just as a way to sort of settle us into this moment. And so this poem is from my new book, Native. God is more language than this. God is more breath than lungs, more oxygen than air, more wind than atmosphere in which to hold it. God is more soul than us. God is more time than schedules, more grace than boundaries, more everything than the imaginable. And yet we are constricted. And yet we say language must be spoken, breath must be breathed, oxygen must revive. We say wind is the only spirit, this soul is the end of us, time rules the world, grace is unreachable, and everything is bound, linear, and fathomed. What then is God? God is exactly everything that is, and everything that we do not know of. Mystery stacked upon mystery, sacred enveloping sacred, treasure buried within the pebbles of our earth kingdoms. So today we'll be talking about decolonization. And if you've read my book Native, you know that I sort of frame this term, this idea, decolonization, within the book. I frame it within my own story as a way of engaging with colonial systems like patriarchy and asking how we can dismantle their power in our lives and communities. And I want to share a little more about that today. And I'll say that different people sort of need different terms for whatever part of the journey they are on, right? So, for example, a few years ago, I wouldn't have used the term decolonization as the tool that sort of fits my life. I was using the term deconstruction. So, while writing my first book, Glory Happening, I was just starting to deconstruct, right? I was just beginning to ask questions and sort of pull apart the web of what my childhood experience, especially with religion, was. I started to ask, is God really this white judge with a gavel? Is Jesus really this white savior? I started to wonder about the language I used around ideas of spirituality and religion. I started referring to God as mystery, and it helped me widen the view beyond what my Southern Baptist upbringing had given me. I did not grow up knowing that the Potawatomi people are from the Great Lakes region of the U.S. I did not know that we call this land Turtle Island. I did not know that I have both a physical and a spiritual place to return to, a place that was created for me inside the breath of mystery, just as who you are was created uniquely inside the breath of mystery. So returning home for me, whether it's a physical home or a spiritual home, is holy work. It is a sacred journey. As I have studied the different creation stories of different traditions with my sons, the Hebrew creation stories in the Bible, or the 7 grandfather teachings of my Potawatomi culture, alongside the teachings of Jesus, I find that we must learn what it means to live in an integrated way that honors the cultures and the people around us so that together we can, in solidarity, learn to go home. This means that we pay attention to the horrors of cultural appropriation, and that as we engage with one another and honor one another, we do not steal from one another and further continue cycles of colonization. So we are decolonizing along the way. I talked about these 7 grandfather teachings, and basically what these are these tenets or ideas or teachings that call us back to these important values in our culture. So things like humility, honesty, wisdom, bravery, truth, love, and respect. So in other words, through these teachings, we work out the meaning of who we are, of what we're doing on this earth. We are taught to carry these gifts in the right way, with the right heart. We are taught to honor the earth, to honor her creatures, to honor the people that we encounter along the way. And the deeper I lean into these teachings, the more I find this interconnectedness among all religions and faiths and cultures. Our work is to call each other home, to call to one another's spirits and say, this is for you. This is what it means to be human, to be loved, and to love others. Let's learn from one another as we go. So in living a holistic life, I engage in a holistic faith in which I cannot compartmentalize or separate out various parts of who I am or what I believe, which means that journeying must include all of me and all of us. If we were all to engage in this way of belief for ourselves and those around us, we would see that God is truly in our midst. We would understand that the Spirit is one of inclusion within our cultural boundaries, but also one who calls us out to so much more than that, to see the lives and experiences of others as beautiful and necessary aspects of our collective wholeness. And that is perhaps the greatest journey of all. So let's come back to this idea of decolonization. After I understood deconstruction, for me, the term decolonization was a really helpful next step. Not just to untangle the truths of what I grew up with, but to ask myself and my community how we can dismantle oppressive and colonial systems that don't just affect us, but affect other people or affect the earth or affect all of our creature kin. So while we're here, I want to remind us that decolonization is lifelong work. It's beautiful work. It's cyclical, right? It's seasonal, it's moving, it's ebbing and flowing, right? This is not work that's done on a straight timeline where you start and finish. We won't just suddenly be done decolonizing. Not in our lifetime, not in the America that we are living in. So it's important to remember this as we think about this journey. It's a lifelong journey. As I write in Native, our spiritual realities do not exist in a vacuum. So when there is oppression happening around us, even if it is not to us, we are affected by it. And therefore we have a part to play in dismantling that and in healing. If we truly belong to one another, we are kin. And that means our spirits are connecting. And part of being human is honoring that connection. So on this decolonizing journey, I've learned a few things so far. And I'd like to just share 3 of the lessons I've been learning along the way. And I've written about all of these in my book, Native. So number 1, all humans need to honor our connection to the earth. All humans need to honor our connection to the earth. Number 2, whiteness is a system, not a finger point. Whiteness is a system, not a finger point. And number 3, decolonization is always an invitation. Decolonization is always an invitation. And I want to begin with that number 3 for a moment. I want to start with this in mind, that decolonization is an invitation, because we are not here to shame one another into changing the way that we understand the world or the systems around us. We change by changing together. We change with one another and for one another because of one another, right? So decolonization is a lifelong invitation. No matter who we are or where we come from, we are people who journey. We long for community. We long for oneness with the sacred. We long to be seen and known and to see and know the world around us. Part of the human journey is knowing what it means to grieve, to celebrate, to get lost and be found again and again. If it weren't so, we wouldn't be human. And to be human is to know the journey of transformation, to know what it means to change and become, and often to step back into who we were before. In my life, journeying has meant telling the truth, coming to terms with the trauma in my own story, leaning into the trauma and pain of others with honest listening, so that together we learn how to be people who walk alongside one another in order to heal. We have to be honest about our own stories and our own trauma, and about the collective stories and the wounds that we are dealing with. William Wordsworth once said, "To begin, begin." And in the introduction of Native, I write, "We start at the beginning. We ask questions along the way. We arrive at ourselves. Mystery is always there. And then we start all over again." And as I shared this mantra from my book, I end with that idea, and then we start all over again. And I want to reiterate that the lessons learned and learned again are all part of the human journey. So let's keep moving forward with that in mind. So this first lesson, all humans need to honor our connection to the earth. In 2018, 13-year-old Autumn Peltier from Manitoulin Island in Canada shared her wisdom and experiences with world leaders at the UN General Assembly. And she was there to remind them of their responsibility to protect the water, to treat water in a way that reflects sacred creation, as Anishinaabe people believe. Autumn represents future generations of our children and our grandchildren, who are inheriting a world that is tired and resilient, and has been abused for centuries. Indigenous peoples who practice kinship with creation can help sort of reorient the church to the importance of caring for the earth's water, our lifeblood. In Western thought, we have fear and this mentality of scarcity that distort our reality. This makes everything an enemy instead of reminding us that all creatures of the earth, all parts of creation, have roles and abilities that can be manifested to hurt or to heal. So how do we view a flood as it destroys everything we hold dear? How do we view a drought, and what is our place in it? Human beings have been destroying the earth's natural ability to make her own decisions for centuries, and she's beginning to let us know that our actions have harmful consequences. Climate change manifests in ravaging earthquakes and tsunamis. Harsh winters claim our homeless populations because our systems don't support them. Insects are disappearing, crops are drying up, people are going hungry. We continue to poison the water for future generations with pipelines. We care more about our capitalistic profit than about protecting the earth. So how do we expect Sigamakwe or Mother Earth to react when we treat her this way? How do we ask Creator to forgive us when there is nothing left of the earth to care for? We don't talk a lot about kinship as a way of living, but truly it is the greatest way of solidarity. We belong to one another, right? And so we belong to the earth. None of that can be separated out. And so kinship flows out of that. Solidarity flows out of that. So if we are doing this decolonizing work, we have to recognize the way we harm the earth through our systems of colonization and capitalism. And we work to dismantle those wherever we can in our personal lives or in our communities. We support Indigenous peoples who are peacefully protesting pipelines. We put pressure on politicians to make decisions that will honor the earth instead of destroying her. The lesson here is that all humans need to honor our connection to the earth, not just Indigenous people, not just animals, but all human beings. Can we learn what it means to be humble, to travel and journey the earth with love and kindness and kinship at the forefront of our experience? I believe we can do that. Let's start small. Start wherever you need to start. Start by speaking tenderly to your houseplants as you dust their leaves. Remind them that they are beautiful as you water them. Grow flowers in the garden and honor the seeds as beings. When you go fishing, ask permission to be there and thank the fish that you catch. Honor their life. Watch the way your posture toward the earth changes as you begin to understand these things. Read books like Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer and learn how transformational it can be to change the way that you view the creatures of the earth. Honor Indigenous people's rights and ways of caring for the land. Learn about how colonization has hurt the land. Learn whose land you're on. Literally place your hand on the ground and tell the earth that you're sorry for the ways that we've treated her. And then do it all over again and keep doing it. That's the lesson that appears to us and invites us into this transformational moment that stretches our faith and our ideas of being human. So lesson number 2, whiteness is a system and not a finger point. Why am I talking about whiteness? Because our systems define us, and we need to be able to talk about uncomfortable things in order to dismantle harmful institutions that don't allow all humans to be fully loved and seen as fully sacred. America was founded on and continues to remain because of systems of whiteness and white supremacy that brought us to this place. I have a chapter in my book Native called The Problem of Whiteness, and people have refused to read the book because of these words. I'm not here to tell anyone that being white is wrong. As a white-coated Potawatomi woman, someone who is from a mixed culture, mixed ethnicity family, I'm not here to point a finger at anyone's skin. I'm here to point the way to solidarity by recognizing that systems of whiteness aim to destroy some and uphold the power of others. And this is not what it means to be kin, to practice kinship. This is not what it means to belong to one another. So the lesson here is to recognize that we're calling out a system we belong to. We're pointing to the systems we work to change or dismantle. So when we get wrapped up in this personal, but I'm not like that reaction, we lose that opportunity to be part of the change. We recognize where and how and why we belong to one another. And we celebrate our differences by holding up injustice and speaking the truth in all spaces. So what I learned in my church growing up was how to be a devout evangelical. But I was also being taught that for my identity to matter, I must assimilate. I must take on the American dream as best I could. So my life became about pleasing this American God who really cannot be pleased. We remember that people have been oppressed by the church, oppressed in the name of Jesus, and told that they can't know God in the way they were born to know God. And that has resulted in these splits and these fractures in the world. So when we remember, when we step back, we begin to ask questions. Many of us ask, is God really a God who is white? Is God this patriarchal king? How can this be God? How can the church reconcile this years later when it feels like the church is imploding sometimes? How can the white American church, with a history of complicity and abuse toward Indigenous peoples, ask questions about the nature of God if we cannot ask ourselves to take an honest look at our own intentions? Vine Deloria Jr. wrote a book called God is Red, and this is what he says in the book. Instead of working toward the kingdom of God on earth, history becomes the story of a particular race fulfilling its manifest destiny. So whiteness is its own culture that requires the erasure of all others, considering them less than. It is believing in that well-known metaphor of a melting pot that we love to hold on to in America, but it erases the value and the lives of the other within that narrative. And in the process, it presents the idea of assimilation as a virtue. But really, assimilation is about power. It's power that puts shackles on Black people, Indigenous people, other people of color. So let's center ourselves here again in this space. Let's be present to this moment in this conversation. What can we do right now to dismantle these systems that are oppressive and that are fueled by hate? You're here in this moment, and that's a start. That's a beginning. That's part of the process, right? That's accepting the invitation. So let's move on to this idea of invitation. Once again, decolonization is always an invitation. I hope by now that you've felt that reality, that this work of solidarity and dismantling systems of oppression towards others and towards the earth is an invitation, it's a gift. It's this warm welcome into a more embodied way of belonging. For me, decolonization has always come fueled by questions, fueled by this fire, that needs oxygen to breathe, by that first flicker. Decolonization is like this outstretched hand that says, what if there is another way? Isn't that a beautiful picture to hold on to as we do this work together? What if there is another way? So one big question for me is often this one. What does it mean to be Indigenous and to have ties to the person of Jesus without being tied to the destructive colonizing institution of the church? It is a constant decolonizing. It is a constant longing for interactions with others who, following the universal Christ, as Richard Rohr calls it, can take on the hope of a decolonizing faith. It's sharing space with Black people, Indigenous people, other people of color, disabled and queer people, letting our experiences shape one another. It means interacting with my white friends and having difficult conversations. It means facing my own privilege in this conversation. Deconstruction and decolonization can be partners, along with grief and truth-telling. May we learn from this community that we are called to the bigger work ahead of us, so that together we know what it means to return to mystery, the mystery that has always wanted all of us. May we do this work together so that each day that we go, we are building a future that is made for everyone. I want to end here with a story from Native. It's sort of a reflection on future generations, because they are the ones that will carry on the work that we want to begin today. They are the ones who will do this. One afternoon, we were getting ready to move from one house to another across town, and I was going through old containers of our belongings. The week before, my therapist asked me if I had any journals from when I was young, and I found them beginning in 4th grade, right after my parents divorced. I found journals with notes on every sin I believed I'd committed, every shame that hung over my head. I told God I was sorry more often than I reminded myself that I'm loved and valued and sacred. The church taught me to view my life as a series of boxes to be ticked off. Every day was a choice. Did you save someone's soul from hell or didn't you? Did you sin or didn't you? Were you pure or weren't you? And yet I hope something different for my children. I hope something for their future that begins with the sacredness of who they are, that begins with the sacredness of this earth and the gifts she pours over us day after day. Richard Rohr writes, "We'll never solve the way to a new life in our heads. We have to live our way into a new kind of thinking." This is exactly what the children around us embody for us today. This is what I hope for my children and for your children, for my neighbors next door, for the people across the ocean I'll never meet. If we can learn to believe not just that people are sacred, but that the earth is sacred, that she is our teacher, that the creatures around us are sacred, maybe our children will pave the way to a better future for all of us. Maybe they will be the ones who fight climate change, who save our rainforests, who write in their journals, I know I am beloved. I know the earth is beloved. I know my neighbor is beloved. We live in an era in which young people are leading us. They are leading us on issues of gun control. They are leading us on issues of climate change. They are leading protests and marches. They're making phone calls to their senators. They're changing systems. Some of them are showing up to vote because they know that they are the holders of the future. And we know that being a parent means participating in this active communal work of loving and letting go of our children, of preparing and sending out to make room on the earth for more love and more hope. And that stretches beyond religion, beyond culture. It is the work of the human soul. But it is also beyond the work of parenthood. All of our children belong to all of us because that's what kinship does. It's a reminder of that dust that we come from and that dust we will return to. It's a reminder that while we are here, we make room for the next generation to spring up from the soil and create a new landscape. So our native children lead us. Our children of color lead us, our daughters lead us, our queer and gender non-binary children lead us, our disabled children lead us, the ones that are forgotten lead us, the ones that are told to be quiet at the dinner table lead us. And if we are smart, we will let them lead. If we are smart, we will see that we all return to mystery, to Kache Manado, and we are simply to learn what we can along the way, to embody humility, to stand up to bullies, and to show them the way to love and peace. And so I want to end as sort of a sending off what I wrote in the beginning of my book, Native. And I want to just send us off with this, send us off to future generations, send us off to do the work that we are called to do as humans, this work of kinship and solidarity, this work of decolonization. So I'll send this off with you. We start at the beginning. We ask questions along the way. We arrive at ourselves. Mystery is always there. And then we start all over again. Thank you.